Hey, Ben.
Hey, Maryam.
We have not been in studio together for a while. I'm really excited.
A long time. It feels like a long time.
It does feel like a long time.
But we did a live like the other day.
Yeah, we did do a live.
That does count, yeah.
And you can listen to it. Anyway, look,
Please do.
We're here to have a conversation that I'm very excited to have because I don't know how you're feeling these days about technology, but I am like, some days I love it. Some days I feel like it's going to be the end of everything. I'm this... was it called the bro oligarchy or the techno bro oligarchy? Whatever is. It just feels.
I try not to think about this stuff. I've got to be honest. Like I just try and avoid this because it feels just scary and petrifying. Actually,
I would say that if you're someone who feels like Ben and wants to avoid this is a conversation to actually listen to, because I think that at least I feel better after this conversation, and I think you will too. And I think that's because of who we're talking to. Do you want to intro our lovely guest?
I would love to. Kalpana Arias is a guerrilla gardener, which will be explained as we get into the episode, a technologist, a nature rights campaigner, and the founder of Play, which is a social enterprise fighting for urban nature. She's got over 10 years of experience researching how technology and nature can work together, from biomaterials and AI to robotics, gamification, and other nature-based tech. And she campaigns for the right to grow, nature rights, and tech for good.
I mean, I can't think of a better person to help us muddle our way through how we're feeling.
Please, God.
So, Cal, thank you for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit? Well, first of all, tell us a little bit about how and why you're thinking about climate and tech together. Like, what has brought you to this point? Because the work that I know that you've done isn't always been about tech, or has been, or that's not what I think about, first of all. So can you just tell us a little bit about that journey of how you've gotten to this point, and then tell us, are we wrong and we shouldn't be thinking about this binary?
Sure. I mean, they're big questions. And so I got into kind of like this journey of tech futures, or looking at the ways technology can actually help scale nature-based solutions through gardening. It was during the pandemic when all of the parks and sort of green spaces were closing down, and I started to kind of explore what was going on around my neighborhood, and a few friends and I started guerrilla gardening across our streets. And the more and more I spoke to gardeners or people who just wanted to learn about gardening, the more I kind of thought how easy it would be if all of these things were kind of accessible to us. But the culture of technology, I would say even still today, I think doesn't allow us to have that kind of accessibility to information, or it's a very kind of cultured type of information that we're giving access to. And sort of my journey into it was thinking about technology through the lens of accessibility as well as knowledge sharing.
For people who don't know, what is a guerrilla gardener? Just as a quick pause.
I was going to ask, but I just, because you carried on going, I just assumed that people knew what that meant. But what does that mean?
So guerrilla gardening is basically planting in public spaces without permission, or with permission at times. But it's kind of a whole world about thinking about green spaces and public areas as a way that we have a right to our cities and a right to nature and a right to have a relationship with it. So guerrilla gardening is all about kind of planting in public places.
Right, like graffiti gardening. It's like just gardening, like
graffiti gardening,
planting stuff in places, just doing stuff.
I mean, I've not done it.
I respect that.
It's a very go-doer attitude. It's if the world isn't doing it for you, why can't we just do it ourselves? Right. And in so many ways, I think the technology that really inspires me is really tapping into that kind of solar punk type future where we're just doing things ourselves. We're building our technologies ourselves, because so many times the technologies that we do have around us, we've just opted into, we've subscribed without even thinking about do we actually want to have a relationship with this kind of app or this phone or, whatever it might be. So I think being critical and thinking about a relationship with the tools around us is super important, and how I started thinking about wanting to build my own platforms.
Do you ever get in trouble for guerrilla gardening? Just out of interest before we move on, does it ever have
I knew you had a burning question.
I'm like, is there a consequence for this, or do you just always get away with it?
Yeah, I've never gotten in trouble. I think I look probably like I'm like a small woman who, you know, people won't really like think like, oh, she's doing something bad.
Right. They're like, she's meant to be plugged.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I think if you do it with confidence, you never really
Like
get
most
in
things.
trouble. But, you know, there's ways to do it so that, you know, different people within your community can feel like they're able to do it without that fear of kind of surveillance. But more than anything, I get people coming up to me being very curious about, you know, what's going on or like how they can get involved or, you know, what I'm planting. So it really is a conversation starter, I think.
It's incredible, isn't it? Like,
super interesting.
but just what you were saying before about the technology and the opting in, it's incredible how we've gotten to a point where people planting flowers is more surveilled and monitored than like opting into, like, we're more conscious of that and more aware of that and more like trying to stop that than like the kind of
AI
like the kind of
generating false
cookies and the
images
things on our
people,
phone that we just agree to and don't even think about, and yet those things are like way more harmful than someone planting and gardening.
Yeah, and I there's a lot of kind of tech philosophers that I love and look to as like my north stars and pointers in like navigating these crazy systems, because it's really confusing. Like I think we're now, like, I grew up in the generation where technology was just kind of, you know, I didn't have a phone until I was 12. It was emerging, exactly. And now, you know, kids are growing up with phones and iPads in front of them. So it's a really kind of new landscape to navigate, and the generations coming in now are digital natives.
Yes.
So these landscapes, I think we need to readdress just as how we're kind of looking at regulating our current environments. How are we regulating our kind of digital and cyberspaces? So I really love Tazan Khan, who is a scholar and the creator of Cyber Collective. And she often talks about the technologies that we kind of perform with are sort of technologies of convenience. And all of these kind of conveniences are how we navigate our day-to-day lives. But a lot of the kind of platforms and apps that we kind of look to are there to sort of replace this idea of the female or the mother. So we now have apps that, you know, deliver food to us, that do our laundry, that pick us up from school, or, you know, all of these things that are kind of created from this kind of cisgendered white male perspective.
This is my favorite. Can I just say, this is, I've heard this before too, and this is my favorite thing, is when someone points out that all the kind of apps that get funding in Silicon Valley are basically just a bunch of young boys trying to replace their mums. And you're like, oh my God. It's like driving you somewhere, doing your laundry, cooking
like
for
this.
you.
I hate it. I hate it.
And it's
this
kind
is
of
going to really fuck up the way I use my phone. So it's really I'm going to have to delete Deliveroo and
No, I mean,
everything.
I still use Deliveroo. I use Uber. I use these apps, but I think having the consciousness
That's
there,
so interesting.
what we get taken away from in our relationship to technology, we think we have all of this choice, but in reality, unless you are aware of who's creating these platforms, that choice is done for you.
Right.
And it's very much like, it's big tech, big oil, big agriculture. They're all kind of in the same vein of industries where you have a agglomeration of companies that are creating a number of platforms. So you think that you have all of this choice and all of this availability. And this is why I really love this kind of hacktivist, punk, DIY tech culture, because communities and people are deciding for themselves what they would like to see, what they want to interact with. And so you can build it, but unfortunately, like, also, for example, if you have an iPhone and if you're wanting to build an app, it has to subscribe to certain design styles that then create certain predictabilities and behavior patterns across the way that you're using your technology, that all kind of point to, you know, technologies of addiction and all of this kind of behavior that we're now seeing day to day. So we also kind of have to think about the infrastructures and the kind of mechanics of the platforms and the softwares that we're building in.
Man, this is crazy. It sounds like you've gone down a serious rabbit hole here. Like, this is like, because this is like a very niche. Well, is it very niche? No, because technology literally rules the way that we live our lives, and it's everything that we interact with every day. But how did you find yourself at this point? Like, has this been something you've always been interested in terms of tech, or is this like a new thing that you've just recently started exploring?
That's a good question. I mean, so I grew up with this kind of sense and understanding that nature is a deep form of technology and intelligence. So, you know, when we talk about things like AI, there's artificial intelligence, but there are also there's also low-tech understandings of it. And when I say low-tech, it's like local, traditional, ecological knowledge. So that's looking at like ancestral intelligences and how seeds can be a form of technology because their data forms programmed to kind of grow into a flower. So if we can look at nature through this kind of biological intelligence lens, it kind of distorts this idea of technology, and it kind of reframes it so that we can maybe form a better relationship to it.
That's crazy. Because in my mind, the next question I was going to ask you was, how do the two worlds collide? But what you're actually saying is that they are one in the same thing.
They're one in the same. And yeah, I mean, this points to that point, like the binary point that you were saying earlier. You know, I mean, we live in this kind of imaginary of binaries of, you know, it's black and white, it's nature and urban, it's gray or green, and it's technology or nature. But we know that the crisis that we're facing is a crisis of relationships. So when we're kind of dissecting the two from the middle and not allowing them to kind of co-create with one another, I think we're digging ourselves into like this very small imaginary that is ruining the world. So I'm really interested in actually like, how do we connect those bridges and those pathways so that we can have a world of pluralities where different perspectives, different thoughts, different, you know, our phones could be totally different. They don't have to be this black box, but they can exist in a myriad of ways.
There's something you said earlier that I think is so interesting to me, and I wondered if you could expand on it a bit. When I was growing up with technology, which is like maybe a little bit further back, one of the things I loved about technology, like traditional, I guess, not traditional technology, how do we talk about it? Computer-based, ones and zeros, programming technology. Was this idea that it came from it became a counterculture. You know, it was like the hackers. It was subversive, right? Like in the early days, that kind of like computer-based technology was subversive. It was like breaking borders, like, you know, like geographic borders. It was, you know, you were like hacking phone calls. You were really actually subverting the status quo. And now somehow we've lost, in my mind, we've kind of lost that. It's like, what were the kind of hackers and the counterculture, and now like the tech bros and the financiers and like the phones destroying our kind of brains. And as you start to go into this, are you seeing like a resurgence of kind of a hacker counterculture coming out of this in a different way?
For sure. I think there is 100%, but at the same time, I go deep down into the level of infrastructure. Like when the internet came out, it was seen as this kind of like, you know, utopia. Yeah. And because a lot of people had more freedom and there was this kind of like hacking culture, but the internet kind of rose out of the military structures. So I think we have to kind of be honest with ourselves on the base and the foundation in order to really rebuild from a place that isn't, you know, from control or surveillance. Right.
You said the internet came from military structures.
Yes. So I think it was, I'm gonna
It was DARPA.
Fuck this up,
it was
but it was like
wasn't it?
Yes, thank you.
What? What's going on? What's happening? Who's DARPA? Who is that guy?
History lesson is that the internet was originally like for military to communicate with each other. Across.
No way. Do people know this? Everybody knows this. It's just me. I don't know this.
Not just
I don't think it's like common knowledge.
I think it's like if you grew up at that time, right?
I feel like I did.
Well, no, like
I was there.
No, but the thing is, when do you first remember going online?
Oh, I was probably about 8, 9.
Yeah, I didn't get online until I was like 13, right? Like that was the first time we could get a dial-in connection. It was a dial-up connection at home. You know, so I think even just if you were like if you're like basically 5 or 6 years older than you kind of have a little bit more of that.
Yeah,
that's
why what the conspiracy was.
Yeah, and I think it points to this kind of culture of like centralization. And while, you know, again, there's convenience in centralizing things, there's also this kind of pulling out of identity, pulling out of culture. Things become homogenized, and there's a danger in that. And so I think where like hacking or DIY cultures come into play is that you get to kind of rebuild things from scratch and actually build things that are for your community. but I mean, there's all these like conversations. Like there's this book from 2011 that is called Being Alone Together or Alone Together. And it talks about the internet kind of promoting this culture of isolation. And so this kind of propaganda, I think, promotes this sort of misinformation of like the internet as kind of dividing us or, creating this kind of culture of loneliness. When in fact, like the internet has actually created a safe place for a lot of people and for a lot of like non-conforming bodies. And the best person I think that speaks about this so well is Legacy Russell, who wrote this book called Glitch Feminism, which is also kind of where it was really inspired our platform to call Glitch, which looks at the ways that we can disrupt current technologies so that we can essentially create something new. And I think we're missing that part of that subculture and that kind of basis of internet formation where we can think about the different worlds that the internet provides for different types of people and the way that it does connect us and can bring us together.
So one of the, because when we're talking about technology here, I think we're talking very much about apps, about software, about platforms. But technology is more than that. Like it has physical infrastructure, it's hardware. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think in terms of like climate and environment and nature, the big headlines at the moment have been all about these data centers and about the use of energy and power. And I'm just wondering, like, doing this deep thinking that you've been doing, what is your perspective on this part of the conversation?
So I think it's so complicated. Like I feel on a day-to-day basis really overwhelmed because, again, it comes back to this kind of like idea of choice. I think we're not given a plethora of kind of ideas or choices to get out to, but we have to kind of function within the infrastructures that we live in. So there are kind of, climate-friendly type of data centers that we can... Oh, my God, I'm not answering this very well. Sorry.
No, it's good. You are. Keep going.
Like there are climate-friendly type of data centers that we can get involved with, but they would again disrupt our kind of daily conveniences.
Okay.
So there's solar-powered data centers and more green energy-focused ones, but they maybe don't have the same resources or the same power that like their current infrastructures do.
Right.
So it goes back to kind of, what we're feeding into as a culture and what we want to disrupt.
So does this mean culturally we have to take a step back? In terms of technology, does it mean if we want to not toast the planet, we've got to transition away from the types of data centers we're using at the moment, or do we just cut that as a loss and saying that damage has been done? Will we still use these ones and keep Instagram, but then do I don't know. I know. I'm like, let's talk about what really matters here. No, but like, are we saying we need to get rid of the old stuff, or are we saying we've got to think more carefully about how we build new stuff, or is it both of those things at the same time?
I think it's all of it at the same time, plus actually citizens themselves asking the questions of, where are these infrastructures going to be placed? Who do they belong to?
Right.
So I think London's like an interesting case. For example, Global Action Plan released a report, and I think it was the first case brought against the UK government for allowing like a data center or like a hyper mega data center to be placed out in West London. And it's now, I think, being repealed by the courts. So I think as a society and as a culture, we have the responsibility to ask questions of the infrastructures that we're going to be living in, because they are our environments. They're the places that we call home. And if these places aren't locally used or aren't giving resources back to the community in which it's placed in, then we really have to question why that technology is there in the first place.
I think what I love about the conversation right now, actually, is that I think for a long time, maybe willfully, maybe by design, the technology kind of seemed free. And what I mean is that you sent an email. Like, you didn't have to pay for an envelope, paper, a postage stamp. Like, maybe you're paying for your email address, but for a lot of people that get it through work or whatever, it was like this technology is it's free. You know,
convenient.
It doesn't-
it doesn't.
Yeah.
You take a billion photos on your phone.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. And I think the conversation that the AI kind of development that has brought to the forefront is that, okay, AI uses like 1,000, I don't know how many X what your email does. But what I mean is that we're now saying, actually, this stuff was never free. There was always somewhere
A cost, yeah.
using power, using resources, physical space in someone's community. We just never saw it.
There's always a hard cost to technology for sure. And I think the issue, I have a big problem with language, the language around technology, because we've got things like the cloud, right?
Yes.
That makes it feel like
It's in the air.
it doesn't exist. I mean, we might be sending data centers out into space now, but it might actually be in the cloud. But it is also, there's like a hard technology to it.
Are they really going to do that?
Well, there's
Sorry.
I think this is another
Sorry.
Elon Musk. Is it? Am I remembering this correctly? Does anyone know this is another Elon Musk idea?
Another Elon Musk idea.
The Elon Musk or Amazon, I can't remember.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the people that we think is absolutely amazing
Yeah,
on this
one of our
podcast,
faves.
one of our faves, Bezos Musk, has decided. On a side note, can I just say that I can imagine that in like 100 years, two other people will be sitting having a podcast, being like, why do we decide to send all this crap into space? Now
Yeah.
space is totally full.
Yeah.
I know that space can't be full, but we can absolutely put all this junk out in
Yeah,
our
now we
like
can't
close
get off the
atmosphere,
planet.
and now we're
Exactly.
stuck.
And it's just like, removing the problem and putting it
Yes.
somewhere else. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
space colonialism in a sense.
Solving
Yeah.
the problem.
And, I think,
But so okay, let's talk. So that was my side note about.
Yeah,
this-
sorry, I
sorry.
interrupted
No,
you. You
no
were
worries.
you were
But,
saying
what-
about
I mean, where I'm curious about you were talking. Well, yeah. So we were talking about this idea of the physical. There's always a physical cost.
yes.
You have decided to build a platform. Tell us about that, because we started with gardening, and I think and technology, and I'm really curious to know where, because you've obviously done all this thinking. Where has that taken you? What are you trying to do at the moment?
So, yeah, okay. So I'm like, where did it all start? It kind of, so our idea of wanting to build this platform called Glitch started out from the frustration of not having a platform that actually had these accessibilities. And so Google Maps is kind of maybe like our grounding point, because a lot of our planning for kind of like our guerrilla gardens or just kind of like green infrastructure, we look towards like Google Maps. So like if you've just moved into a neighborhood, and you want to find out where your local park is, you're going to use Google Maps or something like it in order to get to it. But there's just a huge problem with all of these kind of like tech, really big tech kind of companies, because they don't really cater towards your kind of local public needs. And so our idea with this platform started because we wanted to create a space where the community themselves was giving us the data and information that they would relate to on a day-to-day basis. I don't know if I'm saying all of this right. I'm feeling a bit lost.
Will you give
in
us
my
an
head.
example? Like, it's always good to ground it. Like, so what does that look like in like? Do you have like a local example you can bring that to life?
So I guess maybe if I just go back 5 seconds. So when we started Glitch, we kind of looked at Google Maps as kind of like a foundational start. It's, a place where you can kind of find your local green space, but all of that information isn't either locally dated from the people around you or the communities that are existing in. So when you go on the platform, you can speak to a sort of chat bug called Glitch, and it's a bug instead of a bot, because we also want to promote this idea of relationship building with your technology. So we see technology as a species rather than a tool that you can interact with.
Let's talk more about that later.
For sure. And so when you go on the platform, you can ask Glitch questions about your local green space, or also it kind of gives you these ideas of placemaking. And by placemaking, I mean, thinking about, if you think about like your neighborhood where you live in and the streets that you pass on your day-to-day basis and what gray spaces could become green, it gives you sort of invitations and kind of participation markers where it gamifies the idea of like, walking to work or walking to school. And in that way, you can become this kind of ecological citizen that participates in your neighborhood, as opposed to just treating, your green spaces as these kind of secondary kind of,
it's like Pokemon
wayfinding.
Go.
Yeah, in a way.
Yeah.
A lot of
'cause
people describe it as Pokemon Go. It brings people outside.
Yeah, that did do a lot for me, actually. Like, I was going to parks that I'd never been to before to try and catch a Charizard and stuff. Yeah. It was a pretty intense moment. But that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
Like, but talk a little bit more about the species thing, because that scared me. And I feel like
We
that's
love
the
talking about
beginning.
stuff that scares Ben.
I feel like that's the beginning of a Terminator film. Like, I feel like that's maybe humanizing technology beyond the point that's comfortable for me. But I'm almost 100% positive that I'm misunderstanding something.
Yeah. I mean, so there's this idea in, there's this book called Deep Green. I encourage you to read it. It talks a lot about, the ways that biologies can come into technology and like influence it. But they have this idea in the book that says, our previous technologies were used to mechanize nature, and now we're using them to naturalize our machines. And
Mechanized nature, naturalized machines. Okay, yeah, cool.
And so what I like about that is that, we're using this kind of biodiversity data and local data points that are given to us by citizens to feed information into this platform or into this bug that can then interact with its own intelligence and its own kind of like ideas, because we are kind of using a generative chat to kind of build conversations and relationships from. And in that way, it's not really about like anthropomorphizing technology, but it's that, technology also has a right to exist in a way. And if we can give it this kind of form of agency and power, maybe our human imagination is really what's been limiting it from, building its own body in a way.
Right. So it's like setting a framework
I'm
that is
blown away.
not. But maybe coming back to what we were talking about earlier, maybe it is building a framework that is not based on militarization, which means that what evolves from the technology will not be inherently harmful to everybody that's using it. And it could just be, that's the thing that I struggle with, is like the idea that technology can actually just be positive. Like, I just feel like there's always this like dark undertone to it of like, it's going to get us in the end. The robots are going to like.
But is that because, I mean, why the
Robots are coming.
They're going to come and get us. Yeah, AI. I'm like, stop feeding the
The
information.
thing is that the robots are already coming to get us. The robots are already getting us.
I think the robots are here. I think that's
That's the thing is also we have become those robots.
Right.
Like, again, by the technologies of conveniences that we've built, we are kind of enslaved to these master tools. And it's, that quote of, will the master tools destroy the master's house? And I think we just need to build new tools altogether. And perhaps what can help us build all of those tools is the more than human, because we're kind of constricted in our human imagination through, all of everything that this
it
world
needs to be a new mom.
coincides.
Yeah.
It just needs to. We need new imaginaries, and I love this idea of, why I kind of love the idea of symbiotic futures is because it combines this kind of biological intelligence with technological futures. And I think from that place, who knows where we can go, and we do need the right guardrails and the right ethics to lead us in the way. But I think, this world is crumbling as it is, and we need new ways and new forms of living.
So here's the thing that is so...
Quick one, guys. We've got 10 minutes.
Great,
Okay.
thanks, Ben. So here is the thing that is really surprising me about this conversation, is that, and let me just ask this in the right way. It's a positive, but is it what you're saying around this symbiotic way that we can be with technology, that we can build and create more than just human, and respect it and give it agency and think about it in this way, and this really kind of optimistic way of thinking about it. The reason why I'm like, wait a second, is because normally you hear this narrative from people who are trying to build stuff that is really actually very harmful, right? And they use this narrative to kind of cover up what is actually going on behind the scenes. Like
Right.
you know, I don't know if that.
This could be the future of the way that we
Well,
live.
I'm just thinking
and
about what we hear a lot
revolutionize,
from
and
the
it's just
kind
more
of
data
current
centers.
big AI founders is they talk about it in this way, but then when you hear about the private conversations they're having, you hear that they're terrified by what they're building, but they feel like they have to do it because it's a bit of an arms race, or they don't really care if it. That's one side, and then you
Yeah.
have the other camp where they're like, they actually don't give a shit if it destroys the world because like they just want to be the first that makes AGI or whatever it is.
Or they're building their homes out outer space.
Right.
Yeah.
But what I'm hearing from you is a grounded, like a someone who actually believes this, not just as a front for something else. And I'm curious as to how this is received in the climate community. How is this received in the technology community? And do you think it's possible when you've got all these other actors that are not? Yeah, like how does this work in the ecosystem of climate and tech and the world that's out there?
I think, well, my personal experience, like in the climate, I mean, it's got positive reception overall. I think within the tech space, more positive in terms of how we're integrating nature within these technologies. And
Right.
there's, you know, more underground movements that are like looking at building softer technologies, again, with this lens of cyber feminism.
What is a softer technology?
So softer technologies is looking at, you know, kind of like the cyberspace or cyber world through a softer feminine lens. So how all of these kind of current technologies are very male and white encoded.
Right.
How we can actually build technologies that are non-conforming, that actually glitch the system
Right.
in order to build something else and build something new. And so that's what the idea of softer is. And there's a community called Softer Digital Futures that you can look up and join. And they've honestly, like, it gives you such a breath of fresh air
Right.
for what kind of ideas of technologies are out there and what we should actually be resourcing
Yeah.
and giving more attention to. But also, like, just I think the importance of DIY culture in that is, like, I think if anyone takes anything away from this, is like learn about the tech infrastructures that are around you. You know, like learn how to build your own computer. I'm currently like hacking Tamagotchis in order to become garden sensors and things like that. So it's just, you know, more playful, softer ways
Right.
in which we can engage with our current infrastructures. And then in terms of like maybe how I think the environmental space is interacting with these ideas, you know, they're cautious, and they should be. Like, we're normally the ones sounding the alarm when
Right.
it comes to things. And I think we should always remain critical of the technologies that are emerging and continuously innovating. But what we can't forget is, you know, the kind of already technological infrastructures that we're living in.
Right.
And I think we need to kind of dismantle that
Yeah.
in and of itself.
Because you can't, I mean, I think that's a really interesting point, this idea of that we're living in here. The option of just opting out entirely, although I guess some people choose that, that means you also opt out of like huge bits of society and like participation. So, you know, the thing that I'm taking from this conversation, and tell me if you think this is tell me if you think I've understood this correctly, because it's blowing my mind, which is why I'm struggling with articulating it, is that we built the current technology that surrounds us has been built on a premise of like white male supremacy and militarization. So of course the outputs that it has created are oppressive, just like the other outputs that same system have created are oppressive. But if we take that technology and instead build it on a foundation that is more communal, less centering whiteness, less centering masculinity,
yeah.
all those things, then the outputs of it could be fundamentally different.
Exactly. Yeah, I think we need to hack our current technologies. We need to find a better use and a democratic way of actually using what we currently have, and, you know, being resourceful about it, because we're at that window of time and the possibilities of technology going one way, because that's what's being heavily resourced, is there. But we could also go the other way, something that's, you know, more democratic, more community-based, and more nature-focused.
I think this is incredible, because I think for me personally, because I think for a long time I felt this real uncomfortable tension where I actually love technology. I always have. Like I had all floppy disks. Like you guys may not remember this, but disks used to be floppy.
Yeah.
When they were even disks.
Yeah, when they were squares. Right? Yeah.
No, when they were like big. Yeah. And like I've always loved technology, and recently over time, I felt this kind of pressure to have to disengage with it if I want to be a responsible citizen, both in terms of the planet, but also in terms of people.
Yeah.
And this feels like there's another way.
Yeah. I think it comes back to design and behaviors. Like that's my kind of like two-prong approach when it comes to technologies. Like we can kind of put like the hardware aside for a second, but at the very basis, like technology is there to enhance our creativity. Like anything that we've ever made, whether it's like a spoon or anything that's come from our human creativity is a form of technology.
Yeah.
So if that technology is meant to enhance and entice certain human behaviors, we have to go back to like the very basics of why we're designing something. And there's Alex Wolff, who's an incredible tech philosopher and practitioner, often says, design changes behaviors faster than good ideas. And we have a ton of good ideas out in the world, but we need better design, and I think that means that as people, as citizens in the world who care about the current state of our planet, we have to really think about the way that we're designing our infrastructures, our worlds, and go from there.
Thank you for joining us this week. We really hope you enjoyed this episode.
If you did, please hit the follow button to make sure that you get next week's release. While you're at it, please leave a rating and a review.
Now, let's shout out to our fabulous team behind the pod.
Executive produced by Josie Coulter.
Produced by Ben Beheshti.
Music also by Ben Beheshti.
Communications by Tara Cooper and Izzy Gladstone.
Curation by Disha Chandra.
Hosted by Ben Hurst.
And Maryam Pasha.
And remember,
stay curious.